Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our midweek Maranatha Prophecy Update. I'm so glad to have all of you joining us today and those that are across all of our platforms. And we are very, very, very blessed to have you joining along with us and connecting along with us here with the ministry that we're doing here. And I do want to thank everyone for all of your support, your prayer and encouraging support, as well as financial support of the work that the Lord is doing here in and by and through this ministry. And if you are interested in supporting this ministry financially and have not yet, you'll see in the description section how you'll be able to do so. And so I'll just leave that up to you. So we've got a number of things that we're going to be covering and going over today. I do encourage you to hit that thumbs up, guys. Hit the thumbs up. Like us, share us, subscribe to our channel if you're not subscribed to our channel, and make sure that when you have subscribed to our channel, that right next to where it says subscribe right there, there's a little drop-down arrow. Make sure that you click on that drop-down arrow and click on the very top bell to receive all of our notifications. This way you won't miss out on anything that we're doing here at Calvary Chapel Harvest Life. So hope that you can do that. Please, again, put us out there on social media and all of those platforms that all of you have as well. And we thank you for doing that. It's an incredible blessing to us here at this church. By the way, next Thursday on our midweek Maranatha, we're going to be having along with us Brandon Holthouse. So I also encourage you, get the word out about that as well. It's going to be a great discussion. Really looking forward to it and really looking forward to having you all joining with us for that program. Today's program is the implications are huge. The implications of the things that we're going to be discussing today, absolutely huge. And man, I can't think of anyone better to talk about these things than our very special guest and friend of this ministry, John Holler. Good afternoon, John.
Hi, Kurt. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, and as always, glad to have you on. It's been a few weeks since the last time, and so I think it's overdue.
A few things have happened.
A few, yeah.
Just in the past few days that I think are very important from a Bible prophecy standpoint. It's hard to keep up, as you know.
I can't keep up. You know, when I came to the Lord when I was in my late teens, it's just this or that trickling in here or there. But now, again, just like you said, I can't keep up. It's it's incredible. It's coming out of a fire hose, and I can't keep up. I'm with you.
I know. I sometimes get my average, Apple sends you this little report of their average screen time in the past 7 days. And it's sort of like, okay, I don't have much of a life. I need to get a life that gets me away from the screen a little bit more.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, and I'm always listening to things on super fast speed in my ear all the time, just to try and get through more material, and I still struggle with doing that too, because I still can't even listen to it all.
Yeah, maybe that's a good public service announcement. If you're on YouTube listening to a recorded program, and this also works on your podcast apps, there's usually a little place you can click and you can speed it up anywhere to like 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, 2.0. And so you can get through a lot of podcasts much more quickly if you do that. And once you get used to it, you can really cover a lot of ground by listening to it. I try to do 1.75 speed.
Yeah, I try to do 1.75. I'm usually more at 1.5 speed though. So, hey, really
Yeah.
quick, I did want to share on here. By the way, thank you for all of our mods and everyone else that is joining with us today. We really appreciate you guys. Also, I see Pastor Gary McKibben at Victory is also joining us up there from Ireland. So, and I know that you have a wonderful connection there with Ireland as well. But glad to have you on today, and I'm looking forward to being on your program next week. I hope everyone can check that out. So if you get a chance, Pastor Gary, maybe you can just put some information in the chat there, how people can connect with you. I think that would be great. So, all right, well, we're going to get right on to it. Before we get into our main subject matter today, which is so important, and I think that we really need to have a good understanding as to why we keep on talking about certain things and the importance of them to us as Christians here today. But before we get into that, I do want to pick your brain just a little bit on this article. In fact, I'm going to bring it up right here. Fox News saying Vatican preparing guidelines for apparitions and other supernatural phenomenon. Do you want to talk about that for just a moment?
I was sort of thinking about this I know I sent you that article
Yes.
this morning because it just happened. It's like there's like 20 things that catch my eye every day. And I think the bigger picture from that article, of course, the Vatican wants to come out and they want to say, okay, well, how do you handle these apparitions or encounters with other beings? And I think they even said encounters with Jesus that people are going to be having. And so it indicates two things to me. One is everybody has an eschatology. So if you look at the climate crazy people, Greta Thunberg and John Kerry and that type, they have an eschatology. They think that there's this apocalypse coming because of climate change. If you look at the Vatican, their eschatology is talking about apparitions, visions, and encounters with spiritual beings. If you look at years ago, I talked about Vladimir Putin. 10 years ago, when he was invading Crimea, not the Crimea part of Ukraine at the time, he took a religious icon that was the most famous icon in the Russian Orthodox Church and flew it around the Crimean Peninsula to bless his troops. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I haven't heard that one.
I found that in Investors Business Daily, picked up that article.
Interesting.
Of all places.
Interesting.
And it's interesting too, by the way, and that sort of ties into this Vatican thing about apparitions. Because how Putin got that icon was he got it from the Pope. The icon had disappeared from Russia. It ended up in the possession of the people who were managing the whatever, I don't know if I would use the term fallout or the apparitions that had occurred to the little shepherd children allegedly at Fatima, Portugal. And they ended up with this Black Madonna icon from Russia. They gave it to Pope John Paul II, and he put it in his private chapel, and he prayed to it every day. And when Putin went to the Vatican to meet with him, they put that icon on the table between John Paul II and Putin. Now, John Paul II was going to take it back to Russia, but he got sick, so he sent another card. But they had this huge ceremony at the Vatican at St. Peter's to bless this icon, so the cardinal could take it back and give it to Putin in Russia. And so Putin, I'm just saying is sort of the big picture is everybody has an eschatology, and there's a growing global spirituality. Now we know it's all fake and it's false and that type of thing, and it's not Christianity or true, but I'm seeing this enormous growth in this spirituality thing.
And
Look at the
relics.
guys in AI. When they're talking about AI, they're talking about they want to live forever and they want to control everything. And so I'm just saying is that there's this explosion in the spiritual realm, that everybody's interested in the spiritual realm. And I think, I don't know, Kurt, I mean, I think it's tied into a lot of things. I remember going to a Captain America movie when I was in California, you know, I don't know how many years ago it was. Captain America Winter Soldier was the movie. And, you know, the transhuman themes in the Marvel Comics um, series is, you know, like, well, we can make you into something better.
Right.
We can make you into a god. And so that transhumanism theme that Patrick Wood's been talking about for a long time and others, there's an explosion in this, and it's everywhere, and it's in everything if you look for it. So I think, you know, we as Christians, we have to point people to the true spirituality and that type of thing. But so I think you're going to see an explosion of stuff like this article from the Vatican. So they're going to have a big meeting. This is a press release from the Vatican, and they're going to have a big meeting and to talk about, okay, how do we handle all these apparitions and visions that are going to be coming? It's like, I think I said this when we were talking yesterday. Who had Vatican apparitions and alien encounters on their end times bingo card to fill in that space? I mean, it's, you know, we're seeing all these things that we just never really thought we would see, but they're here, and so we have to deal with them.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, part of the concern, major concern, is that people put their trust in these things that they see or they think that they see, or these apparitions or whatever it may be. And the adversary is an incredible counterfeiter. Remember, Scripture says that he comes as an angel of light. Not that he is, but that he comes as an angel of light. He appears as the good guy, and he can make things appear different than what they really are and what they actually are. It's also a fascinating, maybe a little side note, that the Vatican, they already have their own observatory. The Vatican has already come out and said that if ET, you know, extraterrestrial, came and actually declared himself, you know, I don't know, on national news or whatever it might be, and if he wanted to join the Roman Catholic faith, that they would baptize ET. I mean, that's just how crazy it is. And I don't even think that most Roman Catholics even realize the things that are going on there in Roman Catholicism. It's just, it's,
You know,
who would have
yeah,
thought?
and look, this Pope, he's not. I don't think he's Christian by any stretch of the imagination, and I keep, especially in view of some of the things that have been going on the last few weeks with Tucker's promoting, you know, using softball questions for this guy from Christ at the Checkpoint, Gunther Isaac, who's very anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, to an extreme. And I've met this guy, and he does a thing in Christmas, and the Pope does a thing when he does a mass in Manger Square back in 10 years ago in 2014, where the baby Jesus was in the manger wrapped in a Palestinian keffiyeh, that scarf that everybody wears. And it's blasphemous, because the theory is that Jesus was a Palestinian Jew.
Right.
And so the Pope, who goes to the Holy Land to do this mass, the next week he has a Muslim imam and the Israeli president Yitzhak Shamir, no, not Shamir, Shimon Peres at the time, standing there in the Vatican, and the Muslim imam is doing Muslim prayers on the grounds of the Vatican for the first time. So there's this merger of spirituality and religion that's going on, and I think it's clear that, you know, there's a guy coming that's going to be the son of perdition, who's going to have a fake spirituality and religion too. And so we're seeing all these steps leading up to that, I think, is what we're seeing right now.
We are, and one of the steps that we're seeing is leading up to increased persecution. Another Holocaust, we know at least one more, will be coming against the Jews, and we see that in the Word as well. You know, we continue to see just this descent in America and in the Western world into absolute hatred, madness, an infatuation with the destruction of the Jewish people globally and of the Jewish nation, of Israel as well. And as we continue to talk about this, this is extremely important for us to understand as a harbinger of the times and how near we are, John, to the times that the Word of God speaks about, to the time of Jacob's trouble. And it will be important for us to discuss here at some point this afternoon why it's important to us as Christians in America today. But let's take a look at a couple of these things here that I have up. World Israel News. If you check this one out, can you see it?
Yeah.
Stanford Jewish students photograph anti-Israel protester wearing Hamas headband. That's at Stanford University. No one's shocked. No one's removing him. No one's ripping. I'd rip that thing off his head in a heartbeat. No one's ripping it off his head. None of it. It's just like nothing to see here. What do you have to say about that here in America?
I think that I see this rising anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, and it's coming at us on many levels. I personally think I'd sent you a video yesterday by a non-Christian guy. He's an evolutionary anthropologist. This is field of expertise. And it's sort of like, what are you guys listening to an evolutionary anthropologist? But he's been talking about Israel and the Middle East and the implications for all of us in the West if Iran is allowed to win. And Iran is behind all of this, but his name is Francisco Gil White. And he's very clear that there's been this cabal that's been promoting Iranian interests within our government for many, many years. I mean, we're talking about going back into the Eisenhower administration. And whenever they're caught doing this, they say, oh, well, we made a mistake. Okay, we handled that one incorrectly. And Dr. Gil White makes a good point is, why are your mistakes always done in a ways to favor Iran? So it would seem to be that you're doing all of this stuff intentionally. And we see this, Kurt, it's kind of hard to put it in the right context. But everybody says, oh, look at all the money the United States gives to Israel. Well, we've seen just in the last 24 hours, the president refusing to honor agreements that we have with Israel to provide them with ammunition and weapons because he doesn't like what they're doing with it. Okay. And so the agreement is not unrestricted money to Israel. The agreements that we have with Israel and the money we give comes with all kinds of strings. And one of the strings is, we'll give you weapons as long as you buy them you use the money we give you to buy them from us to prop up our defense contractors. And you don't, I don't think I'm making myself clear. So you have to buy weapons from us and you can't manufacture them on their own. So now Israel's in a very tough spot because they've sent people into Rafah. And Netanyahu just issued a statement where he said, okay, listen, Joe Biden, we're going to defend ourselves. We're going to prosecute this war and we'll fight with I think he meant fingernails. We'll fight with our fingernails if we have to. So go ahead and keep your weapons. We have a job to do. And Mr. Biden, you need to butt out. This is our war that we're trying to prosecute. And what a lot of people don't understand is that if Israel loses, that this has huge implications for us in the West.
Yes, it does.
But Kurt, I see a lot of people on what I would call the right or the MAGA right, MAGA right, um, that are really pushing a lot of anti-Israel content, statements, and that type of thing. And I'm very troubled by it, because I am a supporter of Israel. But the I'll use an example. I saw Caroline Glick on Steve Bannon's War Room last week. The comments were a sewer of Jew hatred against Steve Bannon, against you crazy Zionist supporters, against Carolyn. You look at this stupid Jewess on here trying to drag us into a world war, and nobody talks about Hamas. So the picture you have there of a kid wearing a Hamas headband on the Stanford University campus.
Right.
That's one of our
Right.
most prestigious universities.
Right.
I don't know. I almost get to the point, Kurt, that I don't have the words to say to express my concern about where I see all of this going. And so I know that God has Israel's back. I understand all that. But, I'm a human being, and I sort of look at things without factoring in the supernatural sometimes. And when I don't factor that in, I'm really concerned for Israel. And I have friends who live there who send me messages that we're in a really tough spot right now.
They are. And, as you mentioned about this individual right there at Stanford University wearing that Hamas headband, and it's not even just the fact that he's wearing that, but those around him, no one is saying anything. No one is shocked. Listen, folks, what we see taking place in the universities today show the direction of law in America tomorrow, politics in America tomorrow, policy that will come from all of that in America tomorrow. And first, these attacks come against the Jews, then they will come against you. I've been saying it for a while. If I can interject something here from that video, which the man really has a good take on history, on some of the doings of the deep state and the CIA, and those are the takeaways really from him. And he said something, and I'm gonna quote it very loosely here, but I also added to it a little bit because I had written a couple things down that he had said that really were great. We keep on saying in many instances, well, how can the United States be so stupid with what we've done with Afghanistan, what we've done with Iraq, what we've done with this one and that one? Guys, stupidity is more random, is what he said. Stupidity is more random with various results. But the U.S. is too powerful and has had various levels of success over the course of the decades and whatnot. And so we can't say that America keeps consistently making such foreign policy stupid mistakes. No, it's far more nefarious than stupidity. It's far more nefarious than stupidity. There's something going on behind the scenes. And I've been saying it for a while, I believe you have as well, that the U.S. in one regard makes it look like they're the good guy. They don't want to come right out and say what the real policy is of the United States and how they really feel about Israel and all of these things, because they know that if they do that so blatantly, they're going to get too much pushback, right? It's exactly the same thing with the deep state. So they operate in the shadows. Everyone makes themselves look like the good guy, but then behind the scenes, what is really taking place is really something extremely nefarious. It's not stupidity. It's all part of their plan. Well, what do you say about that?
Yeah, look, there is I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a realist.
Amen.
And I'm looking at what's going on. So these student protests are clearly funded by someone. And it's coming out. I mean, there's been good articles, investigative articles, in a number of media outlets that I would deem decent conservative that haven't got anti-Israel, that note that it's coming from Soros and Open Society Foundation and other areas. That's one area. By the way, uh, George Soros is in his 90s now. I don't know that he's in the best of health. It seems like evil people live an awfully long time
Oh, sure
sometimes, though.
does.
Kissinger lived to 100, and he was no good guy.
Look at Klaus Schwab.
Klaus Schwab is, he's pushing 90, and good grief. This morning, I do things like I read the New York Times. I sort of follow the Cal Thomas approach to morning reading. Bible study to get on board with what's God doing. And then I'll read the New York Times and watch MSNBC to find out what the other side is doing in the spiritual battle.
Right.
And this morning they had on Hillary Clinton. She's producing a Broadway play in New York that's opening today.
Oh, she's a gem.
But the other story last week in the New York Post, they had that big program the other night, the Met Gala, where all those ridiculous rich people go and they wear these horrible, it's a big fashion show wrapped around a crummy dinner. But guess who made their big Met Gala debut as a couple at the Met Gala the other day in New York? Was Alexander Soros,
right?
Who's now running the Soros Foundation money,
right?
Billions of dollars. And he says, by the way, I'm way more political than my father. That ought to scare everybody. And he took along his new girlfriend. Did you see this?
I did.
Huma Abedin.
Like, wow.
Whose parents were Muslim Brotherhood publishers in Saudi Arabia. And she was the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and is still married to the disgraced Congressman Anthony Weiner.
Right.
But now she and Alexander Soros are a public couple. There is Trevor Loudon has spoken about this for years, Frank Gaffney and others, the Red-Green Alliance, the communist Marxist and Islamic alliance that's trying to tear down the West. So when we were talking about Israel getting money from the U.S. with a lot of strings, but it averages, it's like $3.5 billion a year for a 10-year period. It was signed under the second Obama administration. We're now living under the third Obama administration, in my opinion. But what else do? They keep releasing many times that amount of money to Iran. They roll back on the sanctions. And so Iran has money to fund this thing. They have proxies everywhere. And by the way, there was a memo that was leaked from somebody in Iran. It was a government memo talking about funding student groups and protests on campuses and causing disruption in the United States. That was on, I think, Carolyn Glick and Gadi Taub and others had that on their Twitter pages. And I read it. I read the translation, and that's exactly what it did. And that came straight from Khamenei's office. So there's been this funding of Iran by the United States for a very, very long time. And everybody wants to complain about, oh, look, your Zionists are getting money and they're tearing the world apart and they want to run everything. And it's anti-Semitic. I don't know how else to say it, and I'm concerned about it. We see it happening on so many levels.
Yeah, I agree. Let's take a look at some of these here. Maybe I'll speed through some of these.
Sure.
Check this out right here. Netizens horrified as viral image shows anti-Israel protester at George Washington University, that's GW, holding final solution sign. For those of you that are watching right now, you can see that there in the background. I've got one right here, maybe a little bit of a better photo of that, holding final solution sign. Again, nothing to see here. Here, this is America. This is America in 2024, guys. Okay, hold that thought for a moment. Let's look at this one right here. Daily Mail saying outrage as pro-Palestinian activists stage stop genocide protest as thousands of Israelis, including Holocaust and October 7 survivors, walked to Auschwitz in March of the Living event to honor victims of Nazi World War II atrocities. All right. So protests going on there at Auschwitz. Look at this one. This one, I don't know, this one really got me. Did you see this? George Washington University or statue there was allegedly defaced by pro-Palestinian protesters. And here's the evidence. And I've seen the videos of it. I didn't want to show the video here because of some things, because of some of the language that's in some of those things. But so that's the reason why I'm showing photos right here. In fact, even some of the language that's at the foot of George Washington here, you definitely don't want to see that either. Guys, this is absolutely alarming. Check out this next one right here. Genocidal right there, shame on DC, etc. And look at the headscarf that he's wearing there. And this is okay here in America right now. And the defacing of these things. Look at this one here. Enraged New Yorkers rip anti-Israeli protesters for vandalizing the World War I memorial, burning the U.S. flag, again, and saying it is disgusting. Here's another photo of them vandalizing it, and this was, I think, earlier on because there's more stuff that was put on there afterwards, burning stuff down at the foot of that. And look at this, George Washington University president, says school needs help from D.C. police as protesters call for beheadings. They actually had held a mock trial out there on the grounds of GWU, and they were calling for the guillotine for the beheadings of school administrative staff. Wow, that's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, by the way, there was a tweet going around. I shared it with Brandon. I'll have to send you a copy of it. It's put up by an Israeli lady about the symbolism in the Palestinian keffiyeh, this headscarf. And there's a couple blue lines, and there's waves in between, and then there's the crosshatch pattern. The crosshatch pattern represents fishing nets. It really ties in the theme of from the river to the sea in that scarf. So all these people wearing this scarf, wrapping the baby Jesus in the scarf, the one who said he's coming back when you acknowledge who I am, I will return. When you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, they wrap him in a scarf that really says from the river to sea, which talks about the annihilation of the Jewish people.
That's what it is, genocide.
And so all these naive people, and you saw those. I saw somebody at Auschwitz. I think I played it in my update on Sunday. I use the term Palestinian because that's what everybody uses. A Palestinian guy walking around Auschwitz saying, "Yes, Jews, this is where the ovens were, and this is where you will return." Posting it on Twitter. By the way, he was allowed to do that. And a guy who posts stuff that's pro-Jewish for an organization called Jewish Voice has now been banned by Twitter.
Unbelievable.
And these anti-Jewish haters like a guy named Jackson Hinkle, Partisan Girl, who are it's just a constant stream of lies from these people. Right. They're okay. Right. But a guy who's posting truth about what's going on over there gets banned by Twitter. And everybody wants to say, oh, we love Elon Musk and he's helping us out with free speech. But I'm not so sure at times, right. Kurt.
Right.
I'm not so sure that people that we think are our allies are really our allies. And we've seen a lot of disappointment with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and others like that in the way they're going. And it's concerning. So I saw these tweets. The one tweet where the people on the U.S. campus is saying, you Jews go back to Europe. And then the tweet right below it was a picture a video of people searching for Jews in Athens, Greece, to drag them out of their hotels. Oh, so you want to go back to Europe for that? And the Palestinians said, "Yeah, we want you to go back to Europe because we're going to send you back to Auschwitz."
Right.
I'm telling you what, Kurt. I don't. This isn't 1930s Germany. It's all over the world. That's the difference this
Right.
time.
It's on a
It's
much
everywhere.
it's on a much larger scale. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you had seen the video reels. This was the latter part of 23, I think it was, or I don't know. It was sometime last year. We're at that Russian airport. Remember
Uh-huh.
how they were going from one part to another, doing a room to room check? They were absolutely, they had gone mad. They had just, I mean, they were murderous. Show us the Jews. Are there any Jews in here? We want the Jews. Give us the Jews. I mean, good grief. They were looking to pull Jews out and to kill them right there on the spot. Guys, this is all over the world. It's exactly what you're saying. This is on a much larger scale now.
The Russian Orthodox Church has always had a very long history of extreme anti-Semitism. In fact, I have a pastor friend in Ukraine, and I don't want to get into the merits of the war or anything like that, but I see all these people on the right acting like Putin's our friend, which I think is just one of the most poorly thought out positions I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
That's not to say Zelensky's a choir boy or anything like that.
Right.
But, I have friends in Ukraine who've helped Jews get back to Israel from Russia because they can't get from Russia directly to Israel. I don't think a lot of people know that. They have to go through Ukraine or through Europe. And so that's where ministries that help with that work. They help Russian Jews, but they're based in Ukraine because that's where the Russian Jews have to go to get back to Israel. And so we see this thing all over the world too of sort of like pushing the Jews back to Israel. Israel's under attack. They're at war on many, many fronts right now, but they're it's sort of like I see all my Jewish friends who have podcasts and stuff. If you're Jews in America, you need to leave. You need to come back where it's safe in Israel. And Israel's at war. So this is speeding up a lot of these things that we know there's a progression to an ultimate fulfillment of these Bible prophecies. And so we're in that progression thing. And I just think it's accelerating and converging. I talk about that all the time. And I just think we're seeing it happen right in front of our eyes.
We are. And we know that during the tribulation, 2/3 of them aren't going to make it through.
Yeah, I hope that there's a different way that we can figure out the math on that. That's my personal opinion. But I know that it's there.
Right.
Certainly
We know when we look in the Word as well. What is it? Revelation 20 verse 4. It says, "And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years." That again, it begins with the Jews, but it will continue to move on to those who know the Lord. In fact, I was even thinking earlier today, in Nazi Germany, by the way, of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, theologian, Lutheran pastor there at that time. And I don't know, I think it was just a matter of days, maybe a couple of weeks or so, before the Allies had actually gotten in there to Germany, and he was just a couple of weeks from being saved, but they executed him there as well. There were many Christians. Many don't realize this. There were many Christians that were executed during the whole Holocaust period as well.
Right. And I think, wasn't it Victory in Europe Day was just yesterday that was celebrated.
Oh, was it?
It doesn't get celebrated much anymore, but
Right.
It certainly happened, and there's this strange convergence of holidays. There's Victory in Europe Day, and then Holocaust Remembrance Day, and a Memorial Day, and then next week is the anniversary date that they are celebrating the rebirth of the nation of Israel from 1948.
Right.
So all these things are kind of converging in this week while Israel's at war, while Israel's in Rafah. Um, I don't know.
It,
There's just too much going on.
it blows my mind how Israel was attacked, but Israel's the bad guy. It blows my mind how, and these protesters that we've got here in America, most of them don't even know what they're protesting. They don't even know or have a clear, many of them do, many of them don't. Then there's those that have infiltrated those ranks as well. But I mean, it's just sheer madness. It's pure hatred. The things that God has ordained to be a particular way. Satan loves to come against those things, to pervert those things, and we see that. We see that. And so again, as they're doing these things to the Jews today, look, if we allow these things to persist in America, then what we are going to see is increased and the growth of persecution here against the church. Let's remember what it says in 2 Timothy chapter 3, where it says this. 2 Timothy chapter 3, beginning in verse 13, I believe. Yes. No, I'm sorry, verse 10. But you have carefully followed my doctrine, manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, perseverance. Persecutions, afflictions, which happened to me at Antioch, at Iconium, at Lystra, what persecutions I endured, and out of them all the Lord delivered me. Praise the Lord. Listen, yes, and all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. What are your thoughts as to where you see all of this going for the American church and the church in the Western world today?
Well, look, on the church side, I think that I know I have said this many times and I stand by it. I do believe that the issue of Israel and how this works out in end times Bible prophecy will be the most divisive issue in the evangelical church until Jesus returns. It will divide fellowships. It will divide churches. It will divide friends. We're already seeing it. People that we thought were our allies have just completely caved on the issue of Israel. They've been intellect and so you will watch. Use Tucker as an example. You'll see Tucker interview a rabidly anti-Jewish, Jew-hating, Israel-hating Arab guy who claims to be a Christian pastor, not a Christian pastor. I've met him. I've studied him. He is a radical Marxist liberation theologian, just like Pope John Paul II. And it is appalling to me, Kurt, to see people who we think are our allies, Christian allies in a culture war that we're in, cave so quickly on this issue. I saw a pastor tweet this, and I thought it was very wise. Look at how quickly the wall of separation between the left and the right in America dissolved when it came to the issue of Israel. Can you think of any other issue on which that wall of separation would have dissolved so quickly? Would it have happened on LGBTQ issues? Would it have happened on abortion? By the way, this is happening on abortion, unfortunately, but that's another issue for a different show. Look at how quickly it happened. And I guess the thing that I would say is the remnant is going to continue to shrink. But the remnant is also going to, I think, self-identify and rise up and organize a bit. I think I see that happening as well. But this issue of Israel will be the most divisive issue in the church until the Lord returns.
Yeah, I think that's very likely, and we're already seeing so much of that right now today. And I mean, not only with the church, but we're seeing the divisiveness of this with us as a country. We're seeing it in the universities. We're seeing the growth of the protests, the shutting down of freeways, the shutting down of bridges over these things. And I really wonder what could happen or what may happen if there are those that say, you know what, let's take the border crisis issue and those that have come across our borders illegally, those that have come in that are bad state actors from other countries with nefarious plans, and they utilize the current situation of the issue over Israel, Hamas, Palestinians, all of that, and they utilize that and infiltrate that. Maybe they're already doing so. I don't know. And utilize that to really just bust this thing out into something that which could be absolutely horrific and bring great chaos here to America.
Well, it's going to operate on. You're exactly right, and I think it's going to operate on many levels. Though, with the bringing in of these people, you're already seeing. Listen, the whole thing, and I know everybody, I think people put too much hope on Donald Trump. We've talked about this before. He's not the Messiah. He's
No.
not our savior. He might slow things down a little bit. He does stuff that I like. He does stuff I don't like. But you need to understand the apparatus that is in place to completely upend all of our institutions in the United States. So this illegal immigration, okay, this is a long-term plan. Some of these people coming in are going to vote in the upcoming election. They're saying this in interviews as people are catching them at the border. I'm here to vote for Joe Biden. But you're an alien. You can't vote. But I don't know. I'm just telling you if you thought the 2020 election was chaotic,
Right.
You've seen nothing yet.
Right.
It's going to be litigation and fighting and trench warfare. And the long-term thing, though, of all these people coming in, they're going to pack them. They're packing them in certain parts of the country. It's changing the demographics. So that I suspect that most of them are going to left-leaning states. That increases the population of those left-leaning states. When the next census takes place, those states will get more congressional seats than the other states, the swing states and the right-leanings, the red states. And so it's going to change the balance. Right now the Republicans have a 1-seat majority. And they're changing the demographics of the country. There was a report today, Kurt, the American birth rate is now the lowest it's ever been. And so everybody talks about, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist because you talk about the great replacement and everything. Okay, it's happening. It's not a conspiracy. It's happening right in front of us. So if the Lord tarries, this thing is, when the 2030 census comes around, it's going to completely change because American natural birth rate's falling, bringing in more people that are aligned with the Red-Green Alliance. I don't understand this. Kurt, we could go for hours about this. They're bringing these people in through the Darien Gap. This is one of the most difficult jungles in the world to get across. And they're making and people are dying on the way. But it's almost like a survival of the fittest test. And so we'll get the fittest people through that gap. We'll oppress them financially, sexually, abuse them, and everything. And we'll wear them down so they'll do whatever we want. I think it's like some kind of strange test to get the fittest people through, but to have them broken psychologically by the time they get through. And they're coming by the. I don't understand how it's happening. You know, Kurt, I've watched this immigration for years. It was children. Remember back in the Obama administration, all these children were coming. They're supposedly walking 1,200 to 1,800 miles from the Mexico, Guatemala, or Honduras border across Mexico and mountains and cities and rivers and deserts. Children,
right?
1,200, 1,800 miles. I've told this story before. I was with my cousin once in Dayton, and my little brother and I, we went out with, hey, let's walk here. So we ended up, and we played all day and everything. We were in good shape. We walked 10 miles that day. We figured out later. We thought we were going to die. We're like 10 years old. Okay, there's no way these kids are walking 1,200 miles, 1,800 miles across Mexico. Somebody's taking them to the border and delivering them by rail car or bus or whatever. It's completely organized, and we haven't figured out a way to fight it on people that oppose it. I'm not against immigration, by the way, but
legal immigration.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's one. So the Israel issue, to get back to what you asked, the Israel issue is going to be very big. And I'm also very concerned, and I know we're about out of time. I'm very concerned about the multi-front war that Israel is facing. I mean, Kurt, when Iran goes to shoot all those drones and missiles at Israel a couple of weeks ago, they only did that after they got the approval from the Biden administration. Okay, well, you can do it, but don't make it too bad. And I think it was all a ruse. Okay, Israel did well. I'm glad, nothing really got through. But you need to understand, there's a lady who's been interviewed. You can look her up online, Miri Elson. She's the director of the International Institute for Counterterrorism in Israel at Reichman University. And I saw her interviewed recently. She's an expert on North. Alma Research is great to follow. I've interviewed people from there on my channel. And whatever happened on April 13th or 14th, when Iran shot 350 missiles, drones, and whatever, Hezbollah has the capability to shoot 5,000 in a day.
Right.
And it may be even greater. It will overwhelm the system. I interviewed somebody from Alma. I said, what happens if Hezbollah really cuts loose? So Miri Elson from the Counterterrorism Institute, she says, Israel will sustain casualties across Israel of 200 to 500 dead Israelis every day for a week to weeks. They war gamed it a few years ago. You can find it online. I asked Avraham Levine from Alma what will happen. And he said, if this cuts loose, and he's IDF reserve, he served in Gaza, he's got a son in Gaza, he has 8 children, he's a security expert, he lives in the Golan 1 mile from the Syrian border. He says, if Hezbollah cuts loose, no Israeli child will go to school in Israel for at least a year. I mean, this could happen tomorrow. You understand that?
Absolutely.
I understand that. But nobody in the media is really, it's only guys like us and a few people in Israel, Caroline Glick and
right.
and Miri Elson and Avraham Levine and Zarit Zahavi from Alma Research that are talking about it. And you need to seek these people out. Jonathan Spire from Jerusalem Post, the Middle East Forum is having a big conference in DC next week talking about this. I just tell you I don't think we understand the gravity and urgency of the situation in which we live.
No, and it will affect us here in America. I mean, again, just look at, as we said earlier, what takes place in our universities today is a harbinger of policy that will be in America tomorrow. And this is something that should be very concerning to each and every one of us as Christians, even to those who aren't Christians in America, but specifically to us as Christians in America, should be incredibly concerning to us. And we see again, the whole focus of the world is always on Israel. It's always been this way. Every time that Israel has been on the scene, Israel has been the focus of the world. Look, we know the word speaks about Israel being that burdensome stone, right? Those that heave it away, God's going to deal with them, man. God's going to deal with them. We see what's going to happen during the tribulation. And the time that we're living in right now is the lead up to all of those things. It's the lead up. This is this atmosphere of hate that's building towards the Jews, towards Israel, the atmosphere of hate that is building towards Christians in America, in Canada, in Australia, in France, in England, in New Zealand. It is an increasingly so attitude of hatred. And it's only going to get worse. Again, just a couple of the scriptures that we read already this afternoon. There's more on this as well. And folks, even from an economic standpoint, let's understand something here. The Biden, or well, you call it the O'Biden regime, right? The O'Biden regime doesn't want this. They don't want things to come unraveled right now, because if they do come unraveled, it's bad for the economy. And if it's bad for the economy in an election year, that means it's bad for the incumbent president.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing? Because I just took a quick glance at the chat, and somebody named the Watchman's Post posted something I think is very, very important to our discussion here about Israel. We talk about Isaiah 17, and there's a controversy in our community. Is it fulfilled or is it not fulfilled? I lean to the side that it's not happened yet. I mean, it says Damascus will cease from being a city.
Right.
But Kurt, that's a long prophecy. It's not just about Damascus ceasing to exist. There are a lot of other things that I think are indicating. I mean, look at the multi-front war that Israel's facing. People who know are talking about maybe 500 dead Israelis a day across Israel. The economy completely shut down as these missiles are unleashed. They don't have the ability. God has the ability to stop them all. There's Iron Dome, but Iron Dome is, it's a thing, but it's also a concept. And so do you protect civilians or do you protect military? Because if you don't protect the military, then the military won't be around to protect the civilians.
Right.
But if you don't protect the civilians, you're going to have political problems. You think you've seen political unrest in Israel? Just wait. Okay, but so there is additional prophecies in Isaiah. Look at Isaiah chapter 7, verse 3. The fortress will also cease from Ephraim, the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. In verse 4, in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob, Israel, will wane, and the fatness of his flesh will grow lean, which seems to indicate, I don't know, a reduction in population of Israel through certain means. So I understand that this Isaiah 17, we always want to focus on, we like Israel, so we want to focus on the destruction of Damascus, but we don't read the other parts of Isaiah 17, which have things. I think Psalm 83 is a prophecy, because it's certainly at least not necessarily a war, but it indicates a permanent condition of a conspiracy against the Jewish people, of the people of Israel.
Right.
by the people in the immediate areas around them. And so I said to somebody in Israel, be careful of those Abraham Accords, because that might be, they go, what do you mean? They're great. They're, $1 trillion of economic activity over the next decade. That's what they're talking about, $1 trillion of economic activity from those things. But I'm like, it could be a trap. You know that? I mean, who are you dealing with? Saudi Arabia?
Right.
But listen, America's not any better.
Khashoggi, I think was his name, wasn't it?
Yeah, Khashoggi.
Yeah, let's not forget that whole thing.
What we're doing too, we've got, I always say it the wrong way, Qatar is a Muslim Brotherhood sponsoring propaganda, Al Jazeera sponsoring organization, but we have a base there. So we're nice to Qatar when they're evil people. And the United States is propping them up all over the place. I don't know, Kurt. I know this all sounds very dark. I know the Lord returns and cleans all this up, and I'm looking forward to that. Well, and I'm glad I'm 70 years old.
Well, before I say something, so you had just mentioned Qatar, and so we're going to talk about this for just a moment here. Before we get into what I have to say about this, folks, I encourage you, hit the thumbs up. It really does make a difference. It affects algorithms, all of those kinds of things. Like us, share us, subscribe to our channel, all that good stuff. And don't forget that next week on Thursday, we've got Brandon Holthouse that's going to be joining us, and that's going to be exciting as well. But let's talk about Qatar. So, all right, this whole thing now, you reminded me of something that I did want to address. This whole thing with Israel going into Rafah, right? And they need to go into Rafah. You've got to cut off the head of the snake, okay? You cannot just take care of it. Can you imagine, guys? Just listen to that. Can you imagine? You got a doctor says, hey, you know what, we got to do surgery on you. We're only going to cut out part of the tumor. We're going to leave the rest of the tumor there so we can continue to grow and to multiply and whatever. We're just only going to cut out a little bit of it or part of it or whatever, but we're going to leave some of the cancer there. Come on, guys. Like, think about this, all right? Now, the responsibility for the horrible effects of a war, and there are always innocents that are affected by war. Every war that has ever taken place, there are always innocents that are affected by war, no matter how hard some nations, probably few, may try for that not to take place, all right? But the responsibility of the effects of war is upon Hamas and by the way, also upon Iran, who is really behind all of that as well. The responsibility really lies with them, not really with the Israeli government. But you mentioned Qatar. So the United States has been saying, don't go into Rafah, don't go into Rafah, don't go into Rafah, don't do it, right? Well, we just found out that the CIA had a meeting, a secret meeting. Now it's not so secret, but it was secret, I guess, at the time that it was taking place, had a secret meeting with authorities there in Qatar to try and prevent, without even bringing Israel into this meeting. Hello, all y'all are wanting to talk about what Israel needs to do, with Israel not even being a part of the meetings. And the CIA holding meetings there with the Qatari authorities on this whole thing in trying to find ways to stop the Israelis from doing the very thing that they need to do. Think about this, guys. Why does the United States want Israel to fail? Because I believe that's exactly what is really behind all of this. Why does the United States want Israel to fail? So I mentioned all of this, so I'll probably opened up a can of worms with you, John, but I mentioned all of that. I want to hear what your take is on this.
Well, look, I probably will subscribe to the video I sent you with Francisco Gil White the other day. Just type in Francisco Gil White and look up his recent videos.
I already did.
I think I'm telling the other people to do it too because he's a smart guy. I think that it's ultimately they want to promote Iran. I've been thinking about this. Why? Because it doesn't make any sense. This is such an evil regime. And by the way, people say, oh, well, we'll get rid of the Ayatollahs and everything will be good. No, if the Ayatollahs go away, the IRG, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, is going to take over. They control like $100 billion fortune. They're not going to go away. It's going to be worse. And so what I look at, I mean, I'm thinking of Daniel, is it Daniel chapter 10 that talks about, Daniel was in prayer, and I think Michael shows up and says, Daniel, I've been trying to get here for 3 weeks. I've been fighting the prince of Persia, the demonic entity that controls Persia.
Right.
Well, that demonic entity has been around for a long time and a lot smarter and more clever now than he was back in the day of Daniel, in my opinion. It's sort of like a cumulative knowledge thing that goes on there. And I don't know, Kurt. I can only say, as I look at what's going on, and I can only think is people are completely controlled by this demonic entity that controls Persia. It has a lot of influence over the world. Sure. And I assume that there's one in Turkey. I mean, look at what this Erdogan guy, they were going to meet with Erdogan a few months ago. He's been supporting Hamas for months. And I think I've showed you, when all of this, I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was the moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Erdogan went nuts. They had Organization of Islamic Country meetings and everything. And he posted in one of his newspapers. I've used it many, many times in my updates. We all have our little Ezekiel 38 map. He published an Ezekiel 38 map was better than any of the Bible prophecy guys that we've ever seen at a conference post. Erdogan did.
Wow.
He included Saudi Arabia in the south, which I don't think is necessarily accurate, but it was. And then they have an active paid map that you can find on the internet. I've got the link that shows everybody coming against Israel. It's on the internet. It's available. And I'm just telling you, so we're seeing a lot of different things in play. So I see some discussion in the chat. This is in Psalm 83. I think Psalm 83 is in play because of the Abraham Accords and normalization agreements and that type of thing. I eventually think it'll turn on Israel. But and remember, 2 weeks before October 7th, Netanyahu stood in the well of the UN in New York City and gave a speech.
Right.
The day or two after Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who rules Saudi Arabia right now, with respect to some of the things his father believes. And so I think that may change when the king dies. So, but Netanyahu said, and Mohammed bin Salman said, we are on the verge of a new Middle East.
Right.
And they thought it was good. 2 weeks later,
boom,
October 7th happened.
Right.
And now we're 7 months, down the road from that. And so I think all these things are at play. I see the things forming for Ezekiel 38. I see the Psalm 83 coming together. It seems like it's all in play right now. And so now I don't know if I answered the question that you asked me. I'll subscribe that to the advanced stage that I forgot what you asked me. But
there's so much to process right now. But the whole thing is, what specifically are your thoughts in regards to the CIA's direct involvement there with Qatar behind the back of our supposed ally Israel? And why does the U.S. administration keep on at face value on the book cover looking like we are pro-Israel, but when you open up from the book cover and you start reading chapter by chapter, the very things that we are doing in America are actually undermining Israel? What is that? Why is that?
It's what the Bible says is going to happen, for one. And again, I think there are demonic entities
Right.
and powers behind these countries. This morning, I'm reading an article that Putin, where was it? The Times of London. I'm pretty sure it was in there. Putin just starting his fifth term, the Russian czar, they called him in the Times of London this morning. And what's one of the big things on his agenda right now? A Palestinian state.
Go figure.
Support Hamas. I mean, where do the guys run for support? They run to Russia. Stop thinking Russia is your friend.
Right.
They do have some troops and installations in the Syrian Golan. It's not super significant. They're there though. They're there, and they're going to, push Israel's interest. And Kurt, we talk about Ezekiel 38. Russia's playing both sides of the civil war that's going on in the Sudan right now, which is Cush in Ezekiel 38. They're playing both sides of it in Libya, which is Put. Erdogan's got his fingers in those pies too. That's Meshach, Tubal, Togarmah. I'm just telling, and then we know Persia is Persia. I'm just telling you. So where do I think it's going? I think the one thing I can rest assured in, Jesus is coming back.
Amen.
and then there's a whole lot of other things that happen, and this eventually the second coming happens. And I'm just telling you that it's it's blowing my mind some days as I watch this.
It really is. It really is. And yet, as Christians, I know we got people that are watching from all over. I saw from Ireland, a couple from Ireland, and all over. And guys, as Christians, we have hope. We have hope. And would you just speak to that here for just a moment as we need to hear this.
Try to wrap.
we need to hear the hope that we have in Jesus in these times that are continuing and increasingly getting worse. We need to have that hope. By the way, everyone, before I forget to mention, the information on how you can connect with John Holler is in the description section of this video. But give us some hope here.
So there's hope on a lot of levels. We know that it's controversial, the rapture of the church. We know this is going to happen at some point.
Right.
Okay. And I'm all for sooner. As I mentioned earlier, I'm 70 years old, so my personal rapture may happen sooner than we think. And I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this stuff for like 25 years, and I didn't think. I mean, I hear all of my friends that do this, that like, I never thought I'd see this happen. So the question becomes then, well, what are we going to see before the Lord returns? And my answer now is, well, we're going to see at least everything we've seen so far, plus a lot more, I think. But there is hope. And we know that there's this great promise in Romans chapter 11. All Israel will be saved. And we can argue about what that means, but I think it's fairly simple to figure out. And we know that there's the passage in Hosea chapter 5 about Israel calling on the name of the Lord to come rescue them at the end of all of this. Amen. As things wrap up at the end of this last period of time. And the Lord is faithful to fulfill those promises. I think we need to be ready to do a few things. We need to be ready to share the gospel. What does it say in Romans, I think, 16? Stand firm in the faith, act like men.
Act like men.
As one pastor I heard said, listen, these aren't rules for figure skating. These are rules for living the Christian life in the end. Act like men. But we also have this obligation, and so I appreciate Olivier Melnick, my friend, who was at our church just a week or so ago, talking about his new ministry, Shalom and Messiah, about I think what Olivier is trying to do, and I hope you ask Brandon about it because I think Brandon's working on this too, to bless the Jewish people at this time, to stand for the truth of the scriptures. We know that in terms of the Messiah, there's still a blindness there, but the Lord has promised that that's going to be lifted. So we just need to be faithful as we stand here. And it may be very bad for some of us, but listen, as one of my fellow elders at our church once said, don't be afraid of the devil. The worst thing he can do is kill you. And if he does, you win. And I think we need to get sort of this concept of suffering. And we need to stand as faithful witnesses. I think of those guys in Libya under ISIS on the beach. Remember the 24 guys?
I do.
They were trotted out there and they were beheaded. But the testimony is they were Coptic Christians. And it's always interesting. You bring it up. Oh, look at what they did. People say, oh, well, they were Coptic Christians and Coptics have this bad part of theology and they're not right about this. And listen, at the end, the only thing coming across their lips was Jesus. That's the only thing that needs to come across our lips when it's all said and done. And so we need to stand faithful for that. We need to share the gospel. I can tell you, I have a Jewish friend, Orthodox Jewish friend. He wrote an article in the Washington Times a couple months ago. You know what he said? He's Orthodox Jew. The title of the article, What Gaza Needs for Peace is Jesus. That's telling amazing. You, Kurt,
That's amazing.
There is something going on here. And we need to be sensitive to this, faithful, and that sort of thing. So I think we live at that time where standing firm in the faith and acting like men is going to be more and more important as we go forward.
Hey, I'm being told by one of our mods that the link in the description for you, John, doesn't work. So I don't know if we have something wrong in that or not, but if you can resend that to us.
I'll send you the link to the church page and the other one. It's showing a redirect, and I'll send that to Jeremy.
To Jeremy, okay, that'd be great. Jeremy, do you got that? Okay, awesome. So we'll get that corrected. Thanks for putting that on there, Caterlin, and everyone else. We'll get that corrected. So, well, wow, man, there's just so much incredible stuff to talk about and to analyze here and everything. Guys, I just want to say this. John chapter 16, verse 33 says, "In me you may have peace. Take heart, I have overcome the world." And that's what I'm sticking with, is that my Jesus, our Jesus, he's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. And he has overcome the grave. He has overcome the world. And we are, we are more than conquerors through Christ Jesus our Lord. He's our peace, guys. Just keep your eyes fixed on him, the author and perfecter of our faith. John, again, as always, love having you on. Love our discussions that we have on air and off the air. And I pray that the Lord just continues to richly, richly bless you.
Thanks, Kurt. Look forward to the next time we talk together.
Awesome. God bless you guys. Don't forget, we've got Brandon Holthouse next Thursday. God bless.